Welcome, everybody. We are so glad to be with you. Thank you for listening or watching or however it is that you ingest this wonderful information. I'm Dwight Hurst. I'm a clinical mental health counselor and glad to be here co-hosting. This is, of course, a podcast to answer your questions on addiction, recovery, and mental health by the Waismann Method Treatment Center and Rapid Detox. And as always, I'm always glad to be surrounded by smart, experienced, and wonderful people on the show. It's great to be exposed to any smart, wonderful, and experienced people, especially in a tricky field like this. And we're grateful to have an extra smart person and good person here with us today as well. So let me go around and just mention who we are. We've got our program psychotherapist, David Livingston, here. David is a licensed marriage and family therapist and a leading expert in the field of addiction and those mental health and underlying challenges that attend those issues for both individuals, families, and couples. And we have as well a wonderful guest today who is Greg Wooley. Greg, we're so glad to have you join us. I have some info about you. There's a lot of good info because you're a lot of good things.
Oh my goodness.
Greg is the co-founder and chairman of the board for the Florida Recovery Schools of Central Florida, a nonprofit organization. I'm sure we'll get into some of the wonderful things you guys do there as well. And Greg is president of Wooley Brothers Incorporated, and also a poet and a musician. Greg is the author of several inspirational poetry books centered around recovery and addiction, and also has been setting some of those to music as well to help people to have those outlets to process. I enjoyed that in your bio that you made sure to make a point with us that you are a husband and a father as well, that you're with your wife, Monica, and your 5 children. Greg is also in recovery himself and is dedicated not only to his own recovery, but to that of lifting up others who are fighting through issues of substance abuse disorder and addiction. So, Greg, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Dwight. What an introduction. I've been thinking about my smart partners, and so I just started calling them smarteners, right? I need a smartener, because I'm married up with my wife, and my roofing partner has been a great asset to me too. So I have some really good smarteners over the years that they make me look a little better. So yeah.
Smartener also sounds like some kind of product, like maybe a sweetener you can put in your coffee that makes you smarter.
We can market the smartener, right?
TM. We've got video and audio evidence that it was our idea. So, and as always, David too. Thanks so much for being here as well, David. How are you doing?
I'm good. Happy to be here. And here we go again. Happy to have Greg here and looking forward to this discussion.
Yes. Our theme today is particularly exploring how recovery can be enhanced by working through poetry and music, and also to highlight some of your experience and your story as well, Greg. And that, I think, is a good way to start. Could you tell us a little bit about the journey you've been on with recovery and what it was that influenced you to use art in the form of poetry and music to help with that?
Yeah, well, I have the blessing to be a person in long-term recovery. I've been in recovery for 33 years now, so that's, like a number of lifetimes. And I'm really grateful for that. As a young person, I was a train wreck of a young person. Drugs and alcohol took me to a lot of places I never intended to go. One of the questions that we had talked about before was how the poetry come in. And I had like a full-blown psychosis about the middle of my senior year. And I don't know if you ever heard of clanging before. It's a rhyming talk. And I don't even know how I ended up there. And, there are a lot of things that I remember from that psychosis that you wouldn't want to remember, but that was one of them. When I started talking in this rhyming talk, and I didn't know where it come from. And, whether there are some schools of thought that say that, sometimes a psychosis is a spiritual emergency. And but anyhow, I was diagnosed with a bunch of different diagnoses at that time. I had a lot of child abuse in my history. Ended up institutionalized with a diagnosis of bipolar and schizophrenia, and they Thorazined me up for 3 months at one place, and then sent me off to another place and took me off all the medication. And by this time, I'm just wanting to go home, because they said I could be there for a long time. And at 17 years old, looking out the windows of a state institution, thinking that might be your future. At that time, it was a really, really big state institution. It was really, really scary. And I became like the model patient. And they said, oops, you were misdiagnosed. You had a drug-induced psychosis. Don't never drink again. Don't never drug again. And that wasn't even in my realms of not happening, because all I wanted to do at that time was get back with my friends and find some sort of normalcy again. But after you have a full-blown public psychosis, where is normalcy even at? And then thinking that you might be schizophrenic or whatever all the diagnoses were. And plus, they didn't really introduce me to recovery at that time, which seems strange to me now looking back. They didn't give me any answer. They said, don't drink, don't drug again, or you're going to end up right back here. And then sent me on my merry way. And I was already using on the weekend passes before I got all the way out. And started my series of geographical cures. And that's how I ended up moving from Pennsylvania to Florida. And a couple more DUIs, suicide attempts, all the ugly stuff that goes along with full-blown addiction. And I ended up court-ordered Alcoholics Anonymous, and I hated those beginning years too. But the thing is there were some really active people in my area that were doing some really cool stuff, and they invited me into their circle, so to speak. And I got to see because I would always say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And then you would introduce drugs or alcohol, and all bets would be off, because I would never end up pulling off what I intended to do. And I got to go deep sea fishing and do some other stuff that I had never done before. And I ended up with some really bad incidents after that, where I attempted suicide one more time. And I was just at the broken bottom place, and that's where I got introduced to my first sponsor, and the rest is kind of history. I mean, we had a really active area in that time, and he introduced me to a life of service that's led me on the life of living more dreams than I ever thought I would. They talk about when we come into recovery, that if we wrote down our dreams, that we would shortchange ourselves. And I shortchanged myself by far, because I was married then, because I had my hostage of a first wife, and she was more like my mom, my caretaker, take care of all my stuff. And then as I started to grow in recovery, we didn't adjust well. We ended up having two children, and I ended up getting divorced when my daughters were 1 and 3. But at that time, I had grown enough where I could say that I really loved my ex-wife, but we didn't work well together, and then we co-parented really well from there. So I was blessed, a blessed divorced dad, where I had my girls that started out at 1 and 3 when we got divorced, and I had my girls 5 days a week. And she was more of a corporate woman, so I could have them in the afternoons, and she would pick them up at night and then take them to her home. But I was really blessed to have great relationships with my daughters, and that's one of the things where the poetry comes in, because I had with the rhyming gift, I had a song for a parody for every Christmas song, and my older daughter loved it, and my younger daughter hated it. So it was always a funny dynamic.
As a dad, there's kind of both goals, right?
Right,
we joke to make our kids laugh, and we joke to make them go, ugh.
Yeah,
they're both great reactions.
And so because and I've said before in my life that one of the only jobs that I ever really, really wanted was to be a dad in my life. And so I started, after we got divorced, and I was if you're a divorced dad, especially in those days, you're in that precarious position where that might be taken away. So I will really, really cherish all the time that I had with my daughters. And at the time, I've been a roofer all my life, and roofer and poet doesn't even seem like they would go together, right? But at that time, my roofing business was just starting, and I could be home by 12 o'clock every day, and I would pick up my girls at 12 o'clock every day. We would have some adventures in the afternoon, and then their mom would pick them up after dinner pretty much every night. And I did that for several years until I met my true love, and we've been married for the 20 years ever since. Over the time of serving, I just fell in love with helping other people. over that history. I mean, I had to sponsor whenever we used to work with a lot more active alcoholics, drunks in the beginning, and I did the 12-step calls right from the beginning, and but I got involved with Celebrate Recovery for about 10 years in the midst of my recovery, and we had a halfway house that would bring the guys getting out of prison. So I worked with guys for about 10. So I had my first 10 years, and then I got divorced, and then 10 years in the church where I worked with guys getting out of prison on a weekly basis. And I was like, man, these people are just so broken, so very broken. And I was like, why isn't there something, because for me, like getting out of the institution, why isn't there something for younger people? Because I had times where because of the teenage alcoholic, I had train wrecks at 14 and 15 years old where I said, I'm never going to do this again. And then you would put me back with my peer group of choice, and I would do it again. And then I would train wreck again. And I would say, I'm never going to do this again. And then it just got worse and worse. Right. And I think that's what we do a lot of times, even still today. We don't know what to do with the younger people, so we don't have any alternative. And that's where the recovery school idea comes in. But
that's something I've noticed as I've worked with young people, and you look in the area and say, if you're lucky, do you have a youth 12-step community, or do you have a youth?
Nothing.
But as far as programs go, it's very limited a lot of times, especially proactive education. We might say, don't do it.
Right. Just don't do it. Yeah.
Yeah. And that worked really well for you when they just told you stop it, and
right.
No other support. Right.
Yeah.
Just, here you
right.
go. Yeah.
The recovery schools are for kids, or what are they exactly?
So yeah, like that, just like that, David. I was sober. I was sober 29 years, and I've served in all kinds of capacity. I've served in the world service structure of the recovery programs, and then in Celebrate Recovery, and been to all and I had never heard of one either. There's 50 recovery high schools in the United States, and they started out in Minnesota in the 80s. And what recovery schools are designed to do, they could be either private or public or charter. They could be any of the school models, but with recovery components built into every day. So with ours is a private school, and we don't charge. We're still figuring out how to be more sustainable than we are, but we have and we're virtual. We're like one of the only virtual ones in the country, but we have where our students get in contact with us. We bring them in. Then on a daily basis, we have check-ins every day. We have different components built into the day, and then we have some sort of recovery aspect built into every week to try to introduce them to recovery. And then if you go further, the ones in Texas have an alternate peer group that would be your like evening program where they can come back and they can have peer support in the evening as well with them too. And we don't have that built yet. That's really where I would like to be one day, to have more peer support and more like AANA supports built into the day for younger people.
Oh, that sounds fantastic. Sounds like I'm not even aware of this before.
I said, I had never heard of it before either. And it's funny because I had just come out, I just got into squabble with the church that I was serving in, and I decided to step down from Celebrate Recovery and what I was doing with the guys getting out of prison. And I was looking for something else. And I'm at a Chamber of Commerce meeting in Lake Nona, which is an up and coming community here. And there's a lady there who says, I'm here to promote my husband's scuba diving business, but I really have a passion for young people who are struggling with addiction issues, and I want to bring a recovery high school into the area. And I started contacting her to see what that was all about, and shortly thereafter, and that was before pre-COVID, right? And then there was some, and I don't know if you're in your areas, if you had like the movements with the RCOs, Recovery Community Organization. About 4 or 5 years, there's a real movement here in Florida, and it was promoted by or funded by Blue Cross, some sort of grant process. But RCOs, Recovery Community Organizations, have been through then. And we were like instrumental in doing that, and then we pulled off into to forming the nonprofit to get incorporated in the nonprofit, and then the private school and all the stuff. And so we've been chugging along trying to do that. And And I know I got long-winded on all that, but that's really where my passion is where, because it just breaks my heart, because it seems like this, and I don't want to bash the system too much, but the system is just set up for the war on drug addicts, not the war on drugs, and that we break people and don't give them a way to get out. Where the first time that you start showing signs of being broken from and turning to drugs and alcohol, that we should have an alternative method to heal you, then not to punish you and break you more, because I don't think that we're ever punished the problem away.
And I think that
more. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, you go first, David.
No, please. I was just agreeing. I appreciate that. And I think the whole process is, I think people don't know where to turn, and because inevitably you're gonna find places you like and dislike for a million reasons. But if you can get connected and feel connected somewhere, the whole path of recovery, from my perspective, is the quality of the connection.
Right.
And then you can explore some of the deeper things, and really not only the behaviors that keep you healthier, but at a deeper level, figure out why are you gonna suffer sort of existentially in order to keep going in this life. And if you can answer that deeper question as to why, then a lot of things start to get put in place. And then if you've got enough people around you who are helping you figure it out, good things can happen.
Right. To love the hell out of you, so to speak, right? Because
Yeah.
we'll never beat the hell out of people,
Right.
Yeah.
I like that comparison, love versus beat. We also get very mixed messages, where lots of sometimes draconian and sometimes preventative, whatever they are, consequences for being caught abusing substances or drinking underage or things with young people. At the same time, there's still a mythology and a fascination with whether it's coolness. That's always been a factor, but media will show substance abuse as something that is ranging from no big deal to admirable and cool, all the way to, I think, the most destructive, which is it's funny when you watch
and I don't know,
different
and I
media
don't
outlets.
know, where you guys sit with it, but I don't think that, our society in general doesn't have a transitioning point where young people go from being young people to being adults. So there's no tradition from boyhood to manhood. And a lot of that, I mean, in my eyes, it was drinking and smoking, and now I'm a man, I'm cool enough, tough enough to handle it. And so we don't have any system of boy to man to elder. And I think that we've really, I just think that there's a lot of places of growth in our society, or return to in our society.
You mention a lot about relationships as you're talking, and there's this great balance where certainly, we have to individually embrace choices, accountability, making amends. That's very important. And I think sometimes, though, we don't talk enough about the importance of collaboration. And you talk a lot about that, about the collaboration and the relationships that were important for you with your children, with your ex-wife, and the positive, healthy things there. And then looking at the whole thing of Recovery High Schools, it sounds like, is promoting good relationships with those young people to collaborate together as well, with peers and with interested adults.
Well, I think that whenever you were talking collaboration, I think that if you put people in young recovery, then your ego is still so involved, right? And so then we make it it's about me. Well, somebody's got to say something about me, it's and I forget that I don't see the bigger picture, that if I can take me out of it, collaborations work really well together. Like I was saying about the smarteners, because if I can get with somebody who I can lift them up, and we can lift each other up, and then the bigger picture becomes the more important thing, like the whatever the mission is becomes the bigger thing, then personalities can be taken out of that. And I think that if you're not able to do that, then a lot of times that's where the ego gets in the way, and we're not able to have a collaboration, because I just want it to be about me, or you want it to be about you, and then personality gets in the way too much of collaborations a lot of times.
You'd mentioned when we were setting up the interview, so that you've been collaborating with setting poetry into music, and wondered how that collaboration relates to your work in art in recovery.
I think all of us have an artist underneath. so in my eyes, my job as a growing person in recovery and a child of God, if you will, because if we're made in the image of the Creator, that suggests to me that we're probably supposed to be creative, and that if you have an outlet to help you be more creative along the ways, it helps you to feel more whole. And then when the circumstances come along where somebody isn't lifting you up, you know that you have an inherent value altogether by yourself, because you become that creative person that you're supposed to be.
I know, David, you've talked on this show before about a principle that has meant a lot to me. I think ties into this, which is the power of boredom when people are coming into recovery, and how boredom can lead to creativity because I take away something that was taking all my attention. I don't know if I'm saying that well. Maybe I messed up your principle that you've taught, but I just wonder how that relates to creativity and maybe even the use of art in recovery as well.
So, I mean, first of all, I think ultimately the goal is to live a creative life, and whatever you're doing. If you're a therapist or you're roofing or you're helping, kids change their lives or whatever. I mean, the goal of the whole thing is to do it as creatively and as interestingly as possible. That when I look at boredom, just to answer your question, I think it's a state of conflict. And because we're a dynamic, right? One of the reasons I love this painting behind me, if you can see it at all, is you see the light and you see the colors and you see the dark. Okay, well, we all have destructive elements to us. If you think you don't, you're mistaken. We all have creative elements. In fact, if you can't embrace and understand the destructive parts of it, which is part of music, it's part of poetry, it's part of every art, anything that's alive, like that painting behind me that speaks of this constant tension that's happening in human beings. And so the question is, how do we first get to know it? Then how do we have images of ourselves that can include our destructive parts, our creative parts, our vulnerable parts, are the parts that, where we feel competent and capable, right? The whole thing. And how do we sort of expand on that? And we need visions for it. Like you were saying, Greg, like I think what we lack is a vision of images of it that we can put forth. And when you meet somebody who's done a lot of work one way or another, they can begin to represent that because they've had to coalesce these aspects of themselves, and I think it's all getting, it all gets distorted too quickly and watered down. And so if, when you see someone who's been able to struggle and come up and deal with those parts of themselves, there's a depth to that. And usually there's a feeling that you can actually get something from this person. And I think that's what you're talking about. When I hear your story, Greg, I can see that you've been through all these things and you found meaning, you found love, you've been in the darkness. So, good for you, and like you're saying, we shouldn't punish anybody for it. It's in all of us.
No. I know that there does become a mythology sometimes around creativity and art as related to drug and alcohol use, right? That many people feel like that's part of it. It's an edgy, cool part of being creative, or that it even opens up creative aspects. And everyone that I've worked with who is a creator of any kind of art said when they've gotten into a real sober mindset and a healthy mindset, has said that when they're living in a healthy way, they produce much better and more art than when they were not as healthy. But people have that obstacle sometimes of thinking that this is a thing that's part of this for me,
right?
Outside the box thinking and being a rebel.
Right. I mean, I think a lot of drugs are taken because people are too self-conscious, and self-consciousness is a form of, I mean, the Greeks had a word for it called agon, which means to be in the arena, which means that it's a type of self-consciousness, and it can come from physical pain. It can come from loneliness. It can come from, all kinds of mechanisms, and not having a vision of what it is to move forward. And, you know, and anytime people are stuck, I think there's an elevated type of self-consciousness. So people take drugs very often to change their consciousness, because they just want to feel like something's moving again, right? So that health is a constant state in creativity and it's a state of things moving. And so if you can help reestablish that in a way that's not dangerous, it helps.
Right, because I think there's a special kind of high that comes from it that goes beyond drugs and alcohol and anything else. That whenever you tap into that creativeness that's inside you too.
Mm-hmm. What kind of advice would you give to someone who is entering recovery, who may already be and consider themselves and know their own artistic or creative tendencies, or perhaps is trying to bring those out to help with their own recovery?
I would say, you know, and it depends on where you're at in it, because I get approached by a lot of people that want to be writers, and the whole thing is that if you want to be a writer, you have to start to do it every day. You have to bring it in a daily habit, because in the beginning and decades gone by, I would say, okay, I want to do this, and I would just dabble in it, and I would do it only when I felt like it, and that can't make you an artist, or that can't make you a writer if you're only going to do it every once in a while, until I bring it into my daily habits and really make it a part of me. Because now it's like I can't not do it, because it feels like I've left something out of my day. And so I think that if you really want to go far in it and not just be a dabbler in it, you have to bring it into your daily repertoire. Whatever that outlet of art is, whether it be music and whether it be whatever that is, if you're going to go further, and it has to be more than just a dabble.
Do you feel like that helps by changing people's focus of time spent? I mean, to a certain extent, when you're trying to get away from substance use, every minute you're doing something else, you're not drinking or you're not using drugs.
Because in the beginning, that's why I had to go to meetings every day, because I couldn't stand the noise in my head. I mean, so I would say kudos to someone that could do that in the beginning, because I couldn't stand being alone with the noise in my head in the beginning. I didn't really want to talk around anybody. I mean, me communicating the way that I do now is a far stretch from when I got sober, because I didn't talk, because without drugs or alcohol, I didn't have communication skills, but I had a world of noise in my head that needed to be quiet. So,
mm-hmm. And what is the role that poetry and music plays in processing other contributing factors to addiction? Let's take trauma, for example. You'd mentioned going through some of those traumatic experiences.
Well, I mean, for me, because if you read much of my writing, you'll see that usually I try to go to the dark side and then end in the light side, and so I'll touch or reveal some of my pain, and then go through the process and try to bring it out the other side a lot of times. So I think that for me, it's been, because whenever I come into recovery, I was just angry. I didn't have any other emotion. I had no emotional arena. I had no realm of emotions. I was just angry and didn't know why, so to speak. And in order to be able to, for me to be able to explore and have a full realm of emotions, a full life of emotions, I've been able to write about it and process it, and it's been a long haul for me, you know, even to be able to talk about it, because in the beginning it was way out of my comfort zone and way out of my space, because I was a roofer and I was a man, and I didn't know how to deal with I'm a hurt child inside that just needs to cry sometimes, you know. Yeah, so it was a long stretch for me to be able to get comfortable doing that. Like, even when I first started writing poetry, you know, what is it, a manly even art? And it's funny, because I have a past sponsor now, where the only two people I'd really share them with was him and my wife. You know, my wife has always been my biggest encourager, and then Ron started sharing them with everybody. He was my editor in chief, and then he started sharing them with my circle, and people wouldn't even know that it was me that wrote it. Hey, did you see this? Where did this come from? And I'm like, I wrote that this morning.
There's a real relationship then between as you've talked about giving back, and that's one of the reasons you work with the nonprofits. But something like art that has, as poetry was a coping mechanism and a processing tool for you, it sounds like it eventually then became a way of also giving back.
Oh, absolutely. Because I mean, I would hope that it would invite you to look at those hurt feelings, those hurt spots in you, and then be able to find a way through the darkness and see the light on the other side. Would always be my hope, you know.
Mhm. Yeah, that must have been something to cross. Then not only are your poems then being shared eventually, and certainly now with books of poetry out, they're shared with whoever's going to read those.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
were there obstacles to overcome there, and that feeling
Oh,
of
there
putting
was
it
a
out
lot. I
there?
mean, I had this cover made up like 2 years before it ever became a book, and it was like a strange season, you know, because I wanted to do it so bad and then couldn't seem to do it, and every time I would come up, it would be too hard. And then you had this guy that you know, it's just, yeah, whenever you get into the editors and the editing and the book process, it's harder than, just like with a nonprofit. You know, a lot of stuff just always seems harder than it has to be. Now it's not that hard, but it was really, really hard for me in the beginning. You know.
Mm-hmm.
That's incredible that you got all that accomplished. It's a lot to say.
Yeah, well, thank you. But yeah, so you asked me before how I come to start writing every day. So like I said, I had roofed all my life, and I got married again, and it's been 17 years ago now. My wife come home from work, and it was right after Christmas that year, and I had a little pain, and I'm a tough roofer guy. I don't go to the doctors for like hardly nothing, right? And I had a pain that I was like, oh no, it got real bad, like real fast. And I thought like I burst an appendix or something. And I ended up having diverticulitis, and I perforated. I never even heard of diverticulitis before this time, right? And then I ended up that year being in the hospital for like 6 weeks that year, and ended up, you know, going septic and couldn't breathe, and like this whole Job out of the Bible kind of scenario where everything seemed to go wrong. Like I'd already quit smoking for a bunch of years, and I couldn't breathe. But anyhow, I come out of that with the great feeling of, you know, you've had all this music in your head that's going on all the time, because I always have like a sing song something or another going on. And I said, and you're gonna die. You're gonna die, and God's gonna be, oh, you roofed, you did one more roof, and you never wrote all these little messages I was giving you, and you never shared them with the world. What are you doing here? So that's when I started writing every day, was whenever I had that real big health scare, and I thought that I was a goner.
Made you reevaluate what you wanted to accomplish.
Right, what was important, you know. So
Mhm.
I think that, you know, now I'm some 5,000 poems later, that you know, if nothing else, my kids will be like, this was your grandpa, you know.
Hmm.
So
That we all, I mean, that you began to speak, and you began to then write, and all that noise in your head, you found a way to change it. And
the channel, yeah.
yeah, I really think that you know, it's interesting that most of what therapy is per se is listening, because it's the other person speaking, and all those voices in the head, because we all have them, and they're all going for all of us all the time. It's amazing, the process of just beginning to talk or to write or to do something, you know, where the inside is now on the outside and gets heard by somebody. It's incredible how powerful that is in any venue that it can happen.
Right, and then if we're vulnerable about it, it gives others, the people, that the power, empowers them to then share their inside stuff.
You bet.
Bring up that vulnerability. That's very interesting to me, because I find that we don't like to paint with broad brushes here, but many times addiction can drive people into a sort of all or nothing state of thinking, right? And then sometimes even trying to be in a sober state of mind, especially, you know, we get into that thought where it's like, I'm either relapsing or being sober today, right? And so it's still, we get stuck in an all or nothing. And it hits me that art is very much about well, try this, then try this. And the poem that I will hate a year from now is the one that will lead me to the one that I love a year and a half from now,
Right.
or whatever,
Right, because that whenever you had questioned me in some of that, and one of my friends put out a book called "Start Ugly," and that's a really hard place for me to go, because I want it to be really, really nice, and I won't never get going because it can't never be nice enough. So starting ugly is a good place to start.
Oh. Well, Greg, this is such a powerful message that you have, and so great of you to spend the time with us today. I wanted to finish up today's show by asking you a little bit about what's next for you. Are there projects, collaborations, or things that you're excited about that you'd like to share with us?
I certainly would. Right now, I'm going through the process with the city. I just did my fingerprinting because we've had some changes with the high school. I now went from not only being the co-founder and chairman of the board, but also, I don't know whether it's interim or long-term executive director too. So we're bringing the Recovery High School back into St. Cloud, and I have a place that's donated for us where we can have a permanent in-person location. So we got that going on. And hopefully that'll put us in a better place to get long-term funding, because there's some funders that'll fund for an in-person location and they won't for virtual. So we have that going on. But right now is a friend of mine have been doing songs with spoken word poetry in it, because I've yet to dare sing, but I can do spoken word poetry. So he sings and plays the guitar, and we do spoken word poetry. We've been doing that at different churches and stuff around a little bit. So we're moving into that a little more. And then May the 4th, be with us. We're having our second annual May Day 5K, which is a fundraiser for the Recovery High School. And I've participated in some other 5Ks, which are nice. I mean, don't get me wrong, but I want it to be more of an event. So we're doing songs and live poetry, and a friend of mine does Lectio Divina meditation, sort of a contemplative meditation, and Drums for Recovery is going to be there, and it should be a good half-day event on May 5th that I'm really excited about coming up.
Wonderful. Very exciting. Is there a place online where people can go to kind of follow these things, or to keep up to date on, learn more about the Florida Recovery Schools?
Yeah, Florida Recovery Schools of Central Florida on Facebook, or Florida Recovery Schools of centralflorida.org is our website too. So, or friend me, Greg Wooley, on Facebook. I post a poem most every day.
Right. Well, good resources. And I will say one thing to add on the end that I noticed, if it wasn't real obvious from reading your bio, you still are working in the roofing industry and things like that. So I think people should understand that all these things you're doing are things you are adding to your probably already full life, right? As far as it goes.
Right. And trying to move into too, is my
sure.
Because my older years are coming, and I just want to be of more service as
well, and it really deepens the amount of a gift that you're giving to people as well. So I just wanted to highlight that very much. So, well, for everyone out there, you make sure that you're going to that floridarecoveryschools.com, that you're following this and learning this. I'm sure there's ways you can get involved, just like there are with any nonprofit. And if you are searching for a way to reach out, as we like to say on this program, if you wonder if addiction and mental health issues are touching your life, they are. There's no, that is the answer. They either people that you know directly, yourself, or those in your community, and it affects everything around us. So we also want to hear from you. If you come to our website, opiates.com, you can learn more about what we do in the Waismann Method, but you can also send us your questions that you'd like us to talk about here on the show, with questions, topics, guest recommendations, or any kind of questions or requests or anything you have for us. You can email us at info@opiates.com, or reach out at Opiates on our social media platforms as well. You can also tune in here if you are watching a video, or you are listening, or you are watching, wherever you are. This podcast is available on all podcast platforms. And if you will share some of our clips and videos too, it does good for people, and it helps us to show up more as people's feeds, which is what we want to do, is to share these things. So this podcast is, of course, a production of Waismann Method Opioid Treatment Specialists and Rapid Detox. The music that we use is the song Medical by Clean Mind Sounds. And I'll just say for our guest today, thank you so much again, Greg, for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And David, as always, great to spend time with you.
Yeah,
And
thank you, Dwight, and really nice to meet you, Greg. And
you as well, David.
I appreciate hearing about all you're doing. So thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for letting me share.
And to everyone else out there, we love you. You're great people. You're great listeners. And just want to remind everyone to keep asking questions. If you ask questions, you can find answers. And anytime you find answers, you can find hope. So thanks again. And we'll be back with you again soon.